Has Southern Miss peaked too soon? It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. It is Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. We will be joined shortly by Southern Miss head basketball coach Jay Ladner. Golden Eagles had won 9 in a row, but have lost their last 2 out of 3. So we will discuss has Southern Miss peaked too soon. We'll talk Austin Crowley, Neftali Alverez, Felipe Haase, and the rest of what has been an amazing turnaround for Southern Miss, going from 7 wins last year to 24 so far this season. Today's episode of Locked On Sunbelt is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. All right, let's get right into it. Up next is Southern Miss head basketball coach Jay Ladner. All right, welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Really thrilled to have Jay Ladner on, head basketball coach of Southern Miss. They are coming off a loss to ODU, but quite the turnaround from 7 wins to right now 24 wins. 1 more to go in the regular season. They take on Texas State on Friday. Coach, when did you realize maybe we got something good here? When did you realize, this team was a little bit better than last year?
Dave, I've told everybody the same exact statement. There was such a huge difference when all of our players, report in the 1st of June, for summer school and so forth. And I was just amazed after our first practice. I knew then, and I know it's going to sound, well, that's revisionist type history, but it's not, that we were going to be better. Now, if you'd have told me then, coming off of a 7-win season, we would be at 24 right now and tied for first. I just wouldn't have believed it. And so I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that I knew we were going to just have this incredible season, but I knew just because we had our overall talent level was higher, but mainly the work ethic and the attitude and approach. Just after the first day, you could tell, and they have never disappointed. I've never had to lose my religion one time in practice. They're coachable, and I'm saying that coming off of a disappointing loss last night. And but they're a very mature team. They approach practice the right way. They truly love each other. They play well together, and of course, like I said, disappointed we lost and. But they've been fun to coach. But I knew from day one that we were going to be better. To what extent, of course, I had no idea. But I did feel like that we would be much improved.
Well, we, just to tell you what your kids are like when you're not watching, I did have the chance after you took it on the chin against South Alabama to see Felipe Haase. And I said, hey, good luck the rest of the year. You guys are fun to watch. He said, thank you, but not tonight. I go, hey, it happens. And he turns to me, he goes, sports.
Yeah, he's been really kind of our bell cow, so to speak. Right. And of course, Felipe's from down in South America in Chile, and he probably wouldn't know what the term bell cow meant, Dave. But right. You know what I'm saying. But he would understand it quick. But he's been that guy, and he's the same guy every single day. He's one of the first in sprints. He's one of the first at practice. He's one of the last to leave. He teaches the other guys, and he's like having an extra coach on the staff. In fact, the other day I was kidding with him. I don't think I was kidding with him. Let me take that back. I wasn't kidding. And I said, hey, man, when your basketball days are over with, and I hope he has a long career somewhere, I said, you've got to coach. If I'm still blessed to be coaching, you're going to have a coaching position with me. And I meant that because he's really, really got a great mind for the game.
Talking to Jay Ladner, head basketball coach of Southern Miss. All right, so you said it was after the first practice you knew you were pretty good. 2 of your first 3 games were against, I don't want to say lesser competition, but lower level of competition. And then you had Vanderbilt right in the middle of it, and you beat Vanderbilt. How much confidence did that maybe not only give you, but give your team that, we just hung and kind of took down a Power 5 team out of the SEC?
Dave, a lot. That meant, especially coming off 7 wins where we won one Division I game at home the whole season. And of course our big deal was a reset, and it all kind of came together. New conference, so we hadn't been used to other teams beating on us a little bit. It was fresh, but again we thought we knew by that point we were going to be much improved, and to be able to go on the road and Memorial Gymnasium, very unique place to play. Beat a SEC opponent. Vanderbilt won, of course, in the SEC, and in where we're from, that's a big deal. And that was a great confidence builder for us. And I thought not only our players, I don't think it surprised our players as much. Not to say that we felt like we were going to go in there and, for sure win, but I think that we did have a lot of confidence going in the game. But what it did help us do was reinvigorate our fan base, which it has ended up paying dividends for us later on in the year. And, because they hung their hat on that. And rather than having played a real soft schedule in the non-conference, we played a good schedule. And, of course, beating Vanderbilt a week or so later, went on and beat Liberty at Liberty. That was another game that resonated with our fan base. And it helped us as we began to start playing some home games and get our crowd. Of course, we ended up undefeated at home this year. And I think the Vanderbilt game was a great start to that.
All right, so that's a good segue. So let's just talk about that fan base, because my understanding was, it hadn't had 5,000 fans in there, and all of a sudden the Raging Cajuns come in and you got like 8,100 on a Thursday night. It wasn't even a weekend night game. It was a weeknight game against the Raging Cajuns. What was it like when you were coaching that basketball game? I know you're probably concentrating, on the game, but somewhere along the way you had to turn to your guys and say, this is pretty cool.
Well, I think it was very evident. Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a scenario, Dave. And by the way, Dave, thank you for having me on today.
I appreciate your time, Coach.
Yeah, I appreciate you visiting with me. And we had they have an annual day, I think, because it preceded me. There's a spot there not far from town that's it's a live music venue called Brewski's there in Hattiesburg. It's not far from campus, and it's where most of the students go all the time. But it's kind of a large spot, and they have a preseason hardwood club, pep rally type thing to kick the season off, and season ticket holders. It's just kind of a big pep rally. And this year we had it, and we had 26 people come total. Mm-hmm. And
so you got to meet every single person
so
individually.
To kind of show you where our interest level was at that time. And Felipe Haase says, Coach, as calmly as he talked to you after that game at South Alabama, he said, Coach, let's have another one at the end of the season, and I promise you there'll be a lot more people than that.
Right.
And we use the term, every time you go out there, you have an opportunity to bring our fan base back. And we use the term 20 to 40 to 80 to 160, 320. And of course it began to do that. And it didn't just go from a few hundred to the 8,100, which by the way was the 5th largest crowd in Southern Miss basketball history.
Right.
It went all, because we hadn't had 4,000, but we went.
No, you're right.
We went through a stretch where prior to that game and of course the one or two after, where we were now averaging 4,100, 4,200, 4,400, 4,500. So it was growing, and 4,500 people in Reed Green Coliseum is incredibly loud. You can probably ask the opposing coaches. And one of the things that when I returned to Southern Miss, which of course was my alma mater, and I'm blessed to be there, was in the 80s. I was fortunate to, not because I was a good player, but I played on some really good teams with some really good players, and that's the way it was. We played in the old Metro Conference, Dave, which was Cincinnati and
Louisville.
Memphis and Louisville and South Carolina, Florida State, Virginia Tech. It was an incredible league, and that's the way it was every night. And of course, our vision was then and is now to help return Southern Miss basketball to a place of national respect, national prominence. And And that had so much to do with the culmination of that. And the players finally realized what I was talking about, that this is what Coach was talking about, because I was fortunate to be able to experience that as a player. And I wanted so much for them to experience it. And now they have. And I think, of course, our fan base has a lot to do with how successful that we were at home. And it's been a great blessing. I'll say that.
All right, let's take a time out. When we come back, we'll have more of our conversation with Southern Miss head basketball coach Jay Ladner about Austin Crowley, the big win that the Golden Eagles had over the Cajuns, and as well as the upcoming Sun Belt Conference tournament. Southern Miss has as good a shot to win that as anybody. But first, let me tell you about FanDuel. It's the midway point of the NBA season, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's head it back to our conversation with Southern Miss head basketball coach Jay Ladner. It's Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Talking to Jay Ladner, head coach of Southern Miss basketball on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, so I do want to dive into that game against the Cajuns. So first, let's back it up a little bit and talk on how important Austin Crowley has been to the program.
Unbelievable. You know, Austin's a Mississippi kid. He's from West Point, Mississippi. Of course, always familiar with who he was. He came out of high school. Well, he actually transferred to Sunrise Christian in Kansas, one of the prominent prep schools in the country, and a top 100 kid. Of course, we weren't prominent enough to be involved in his recruiting. Signs with Ole Miss, has a good career at Ole Miss, Dave. He wasn't, just a guy that never got in the game or whatnot. And but he was playing behind a McDonald's All-American freshman. And the way that he told me, he said, Coach, I said, why, I want to know why he was leaving Ole Miss. Because I just didn't want guys on our team that were always disgruntled and so forth. First time I ever met him, when I went to recruit him, when he got in the transfer portal, huge smile on his face. He was very honest, said he loved Coach Davis at Ole Miss, loved his experience. He said, but when he had started, they had a McDonald's All-American freshman guard, broke his wrist, the guard did. Austin started the 6 weeks or so that he was out, was really good, had 18 at Auburn and 20 at Georgia, and led the team in assists. And but the day that the young freshman came back, was cleared to come back, Austin played 1 minute. And so he just knew that his if he wanted to be who he wanted to be, he needed to go somewhere where he could. And I had hired Nick Williams as an assistant. Have to give Nick a lot of the credit too. And Nick had played at Ole Miss. He's a Mobile kid, Dave. Nick's from Mobile, had a great career at Ole Miss. Was an assistant at Northwest Mississippi Community College, which is close to Oxford. And he was actually Austin's workout guy. So it just worked out perfect. Not that we hired Nick to get him. It just, that subsequently happened, that because Nick called me one day. He said, Coach, he said, I think we, of course, had already hired Nick. He said, I think, would you have an interest in Austin Crowley? And I said, from Ole Miss, yeah. And I said, why? And he said, well, I was talking to him this afternoon. I think he may be hitting the portal. I said, really? And I said, well, if he does, you let me know. And the minute he hit the portal, I called his dad, Austin's dad, and drove to West Point, Mississippi, and sat down with him. And I mean, it just kind of clicked. And of course, Nick being on our staff really helped enable that situation to happen. And Austin has been an incredible blessing. And he's a great young man. And he's also, like Felipe, it's a great thing, Dave, when your best players are also your hardest workers. Both of them have an incredible individual work ethic. And when that happens, the other guys will fall in line.
So diving into that Raging Cajuns games, you guys were on the verge of getting blown out. He's got 2 quick fouls. You guys are down by double digits. And Neftali Alverez saves the day. I think his first game back was against South Alabama, and you won that ball game in Hattiesburg, and he was maybe playing a little bit too fast. Hadn't played a little bit, actually. I guess did some rehab back in Puerto Rico. So, but he ends up saving the day. I think he had like 14 points in the first half. Actually started the second half, but only had 3 because Crowley played. So Alvarez ends up cutting the lead from 10-5 heading into half, and you guys just sort of took off right from there. And you guys were down 10. You ended up winning by double digits.
Yeah, I think that Neff, of course, Neff started the season, got hurt. You mentioned the scenario. We opened up with a non-D1, went to Vanderbilt, won. Right. Neff was solid up there, and then came back and he got hurt in the following game against another non-D1. And so he was out. We kind of thought maybe he would be out for the year. After Christmas, it became a week-to-week thing. Of course, he was improving. But we didn't want to rush him back, and that was, of course, South Al. We were so fortunate to get him back. But he's a momentum changer. He's going to go make some plays. Sometimes he's high risk, high reward too.
Right. Yes.
But he's a bulldog on defense. He He plays with an incredible passion. He's a great team guy, and he just but he changed that game for us. And as you mentioned, he was a little bit still out of sync and out of condition, but he flipped that game around, no doubt, with some of his dynamic plays, and that's what he brings to the table a lot of time. But he's been a great blessing too, and to have back, and we're certainly going to need him down the stretch.
Talking to Jay Ladner, head coach of Southern Miss basketball. A few more minutes with him. All right, so I'm going to ask you a stupid question. Admittedly, it's a stupid question, especially asking a basketball coach, because a loss is a loss. It doesn't matter if it's by 1 or by 30, because you've had that basically in the last 2 weeks. Sure. You had won 9 straight, and then you show up to a hot South Alabama team that has somehow figured it out. Isaiah Moore may be one of the more unique players I've ever seen. He doesn't shoot it past 3 feet, and he makes all of it. You know, the help defense doesn't even matter. But, they played well. You guys didn't, and you lost by 31 points. And then, again, playing on the road in college basketball, I just think it's hard. It doesn't matter who it is. Alabama proved that against South Carolina last night. Yep. And so it's just hard. So you lost a close game to ODU, and you got took it on the chin against South Alabama. Is one worse to you than another? Like, you just, against South Alabama, you couldn't have done anything. There wasn't one more thing you could have done that would have changed it, right? It could have been a 25-point game instead of a 31-point game, whereas maybe ODU, one play here and one play there changes the game. Does it matter to you which way it goes? I mean, in terms of a loss, obviously you want to win the games.
Well, Day, I'll say this, and you and I were talking a little bit offline. I think, of course, when there was such a build-up. Let's go back to the Louisiana game. There was such a build-up for that game.
Right.
Just the emotion of it, but playing for first place at the time.
Sure.
And we had been playing well. And again, I think we've had not that they've, just as I said last night, I said to them, our effort and our competitive spirit and our battle was there last night. It was there against South Alabama.
It was.
But we just not shooting it quite as well. We're not clicking quite as well. So I think we're in, and sometimes you have a little bit of an inevitable ups and downs, and right. As you're kind of continuing up, but you got to kind of a peak and winning that 9 in a row, and it kind of culminated with Louisiana. And then we go to South, and they popped around, but they played really well. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm taking anything away from that. Richie's a good friend of mine and great respect. And that dang Moore kid, gosh dang, you mentioned unique. He is a unique card.
He really made like 7 threes all year, Coach.
Hey, Dave,
he doesn't shoot the 3.
We were staying at the hotel. We're in the same hotel. We were basically getting in as they were leaving today here in San Marcos.
Right.
And I told him I wanted him to just stay over, if he could just stay over a night or two, play with us. But anyway, no, I have great admiration, respect. But anyway, I think, so I'm not sure if we'd have played our best at South Alabama, we could have beaten them that night. And they were really good, and so give them all the credit. But I'm hoping that we can fight through this thing. Not that we're struggling, because again, we were up 8 last night, and we normally close those games out, but we score 5 points in the last 8 minutes. We were 14 of 25 at the line last night, which is uncharacteristic of us. And but we just need to get ourselves back. And the way that you do that, in my experience, Dave, as a coach, is you roll your sleeves up and you get back to who you are. And that's playing good, tough defense, being fierce on the boards, and making sure that everybody's touching that ball on offense, and you're moving the basketball and playing, and eventually it'll come back, because we've got some good players, and I'm very confident. Of course, half tonight, and then we do know that we won't play. We're fortunate to get one of those top 4 seeds, and we know that we won't play until the following Saturday. So it gives us a chance to kind of rest, regroup, and maybe start on the upswing again. Because to win that league tournament, I've used the term. I talked to the people last night at ODU. We don't have a top to bottom league. We've got an east to west or west east league, ever how you want to put that. And because there's very little difference in the best teams and what people maybe and look at Texas State. They're one of the teams that's toward the bottom in record wise, but just like you and I have already discussed, that ain't no walkover. Last night, Arkansas State goes on the road and hangs in there with UL for most of the game. Right. And they're supposedly the bottom team in the league. So there's really no bottom team. We have a very competitive league. I said it from day one. I'll say it again at the last day of as we head into the last day of league play. Our conference is incredibly balanced, great coaching, players, very little difference between our league and Conference USA. Of course, I'm coming out of Conference USA, very similar basketball, and I have the greatest respect for Conference USA basketball, so I say that with the highest regard.
At the time, I thought you were waving the white flag a little bit at the beginning of the second half against South Alabama. I didn't realize Austin had pulled tweaked a hamstring. He came back in the ball game, but he didn't stay very long because the game got out of hand. Yeah. Is he okay moving forward?
He's it's much better and improving. Of course, daily with his rehab and all that, but he's still not 100%. But yeah, there was no point in that at that point of the game. Right. Had the game been, a nail biter or, back and forth, just a couple possessions, we certainly would have been able to play him. Our trainer said, Coach, he can go if possible, but there was no reason at that point in my opinion, to risk him. There's too much at stake later on. And we didn't want to risk hurting him, because those hamstrings can be a problem, Dave. If they continue, if you don't get them healed, they will just stay on and linger, I should say, on and on until he has time to rest. And again, getting to next week, hopefully that'll happen too. We can get us a break and get everybody healed up. And got some guys, some sickness and this crud. I think that's going around in our area. I know a lot of our coaches have had it. I've personally had it. A lot of our guys are fighting it right now too.
All right, so let's wrap it up. It's Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day, with the head coach of Southern Miss basketball, Jay Ladner. Let's talk about the tournament. You already mentioned it. It really is up for grabs. I personally would be surprised if one of the top 4 teams didn't win it. Maybe South Alabama, because they seem to be a matchup problem. I don't know if you've noticed, because I'm not sure how much Turbo Jones or Greg Perrin played like Isaiah Moore before they watched Isaiah Moore, but they're doing the same things inside the lane. But I had your colleague Scott Berry on yesterday, and the one thing that the Sun Belt can do is play nationally with baseball, right? He hosted a super regional Coastal Carolina.
Great friend of mine. Our baseball program is awesome. I love it.
Yeah. And so there's less pressure on them most of the years to win the conference tournament. How much pressure is on there for you guys? It all comes down to one weekend. I mean, that is, and anyone, let's be honest, any one of the top 4 teams can win it. Maybe Troy, maybe ODU, maybe South, but certainly any of the top 4 teams can win it. I mean, if some team gets hot from 3, you can't stop them. If Kinsey and Taylor go off for 60 for Marshall, good luck. If Boston Crowley and Haase do the same thing, good luck. Yep. So
every team has a couple of those weapons for sure, and that if they get going, it'll change that particular game, that particular night. But Dave, I think, and I'm going to let me say this. I think that our league, I think it's unfortunate that our league only has one bid. Right. I do. And because I think that 2 teams for sure two should be we ought to be a 2-bid league, and then on some years 3. I think that's how good the league is. I thought that's how good Conference USA was, and I think and they would prove it. Conference USA proved it when they would go to the NCAAs with winning the first rounds and so forth. And I think the Sun Belt's the same way. And but the reality is, in the world that we live in, that you and I both know that it's most likely a 1-bid league. And especially, I think we had an opportunity had we been able to run the table and then maybe get to the finals in the tournament and get up to 29 and 28 or 29 wins. Maybe we could have been one of those teams, but I don't think so now. I think our opportunity for that is probably less, and that wasn't for sure. But anyway, with that being said, that the tournament is going to be incredibly competitive, exciting. I like the fact that it's in Pensacola. I think that's great for Southern Miss. Of course, it is for South Alabama.
Right.
But it's great for Southern Miss. And I mean, Southern Miss travels and follows our teams, and we've had great crowds. We actually had a good crowd amazingly last night in Virginia, and we had a great crowd. We took a great crowd at Georgia State, probably 2 or 3 full sections. Had a great crowd at South Alabama. Never gave them much to cheer for, but we had it. So they're going to get behind us, but we've got to be, as you mentioned, any team can win it. I think there's 4, 5, 6 maybe that are favorites. South Alabama, a hard charging dark horse right now. I think you can't rule Troy out. Old Dominion is hot. Old Dominion's playing very well down the stretch, and of course UL, Marshall, are all going to be tough to beat here. So.
There's Jay Ladner,
JMU,
yes.
You got to throw in there. I think there's 6 or 7 teams that legitimately who it's going to come down to whoever's playing the best for that group of 3 days.
I think that JMU Marshall game came down to a layup and it ended up being a 9-point game. It was 79-79, and JMU missed a layup somewhere in there, and it ended up being a 9-point game. It was unreal.
I didn't even know that. I knew crazy. That it was tight up until right there at the end.
They missed a game-tying layup, and then they just started fouling. He is Jay Ladner, head coach of Southern Miss, hopping on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Best of luck against Texas State, and we will hopefully catch up in Pensacola at the Sunbelt Conference Tournament. Thanks so much, Coach.
Thank you, and I appreciate you taking time to have us on, okay?